Hi, Mr. Wisdom here. I want to talk to you today about the world of psychology academia. They've really done the general population a disservice. Not all, um, not a complete disservice, but they could have done far, far better. Um, they could help people a lot more, but that would mean wouldn't need them as much, and they wouldn't make all the money. And let's face it, that's what it ultimately is about. It's about money and their ego. And I know that because when I was training, it was, initially, like in college, the psychology courses, the first, um, few semesters, a couple semesters anyway, it's nonsense, essentially, because they teach you what Freud said and he thought and Pavlov's dogs, and that's not what you really need to know. Excuse me. You could be a master in psychology in 3 to 6 months if you dedicate yourself with the right teaching. What it comes down to is this: what you need to know is you need to know how to diagnose people, but you need to know also how to read people. So you need to know body language, eye contact, eye movement, inflections in their voice. You look up to the left. That means you're thinking. There's different subtleties that tells you what the person may be thinking or what's going on with them. And then listen to what they have to say. And then you need to be able to take all that and diagnose what their issue is, and then give them a plan to slowly get better. So you give them techniques that they need to do their own when they're feeling stressed, when they start to feel any depression. They need to do the techniques. And at first, they may have to call you on a more regular basis because they're feeling anxious and whatnot. You can talk them through. But after a while, they can then, once they start to feel that anxiety, they can recognize it, teach them how to recognize it right away, and then do some exercises to calm themselves down and get away from that anxiety, that depression, that thing that's bothering them, or they're putting their mind on it too much and they don't need to. So you should be able to help somebody. Your average, it depends on what it is, of course. You have some psychosis that are extremely deep, and it may take years to make any significant headway. But your average person that comes in because they're feeling stressed and anxious and have normal depression, not lifelong depression like some, that should be a fairly quick fix. But psychology academia, they don't want to give you the quick fix, because if you get the quick fix, they don't need you anymore, right? So what they're doing essentially is the psychiatrist becomes the new drug. You're the replacement drug, right? So they become addicted to you. Anytime they feel overly anxious, oh, I gotta go see my guy. And then you charge them $500 an hour, and you get rich, they get little to no help, and the cycle continues. So they've really done a disservice. But the biggest way they've done a disservice to America, for example, I've been trying for decades, excuse me, to talk to people, to talk to, psychology academia, to let's get out and really start to put out to the public on what's happening around you. I could see the breakdown in society decades ago. There's no way any psychologist worth their salt would have seen that decades ago. And so you should have shut off some flares. You know what I mean? Let people know, hey, this is what's happening, and this is how you know what's happening. So, for example, um, after the riots in LA, you had a lot of racial tension there in the late 80s and the very, very early 90s. But shortly after the riots happened, and I was there, you saw something very positive, that it seemed like white people and black people seemed to kind of come together and kind of overcome a lot of that racial tension. I saw even in Orange County, especially at that time, where it was mostly white and Asian, and had a reputation from the past as being fairly racist. I saw so many black people there hanging out, dating white girls, and they had no problems. People were just they were done with the racial bullcrap, and they were trying to get past it. And here's what happened. Most people don't see this. You got to pay attention. What happened was the powers that be, the globalist deep state, if you will, they saw this and they went, "Oh no, 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 we can't allow that. Whites and blacks getting along? No, 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 no." So that's when they started to bring in the uh, Black history studies in school, and Latino studies, and gender studies. That's when they really started to ramp that stuff up. They had already started, but they were just kind of testing the waters more than for the most part. That's when they really, mid to late 90s, when they really started ramping it up. Now that in itself isn't a bad thing if you do it right. But they did it all in the negative. So purely negative against males, or white people, or white males more in particular. And now you see the results, 30 years later, 30 plus years later. You see the result. Who's the most hated group in America? White males. They weren't 30 years ago. Why are they most hated now? Because they planting the seeds, planting the seeds, planting the seeds. Because if you check out those courses I told you about, whether it's gender studies or Black history, Latino history, it is so full of hate and negativity toward white people, and no positivity at all toward white people. And any positivity is just with their own people, black people, or Latinos. Even though, for example, like the Underground Railroad for slaves, saving slaves and getting them out up to the north. Well, there was a lot of white people that helped. They couldn't have done that without white people. But they don't want to talk about that, right? They don't want to talk about the fact that most white people in America did not have slaves or approve of slavery. They didn't have any control over it, so they couldn't stop it. Excuse me. So they pushed it in everybody's head. 1800s, every white person in America is racist. Not true at all. Absolutely not true at all. Also, slavery, one thing a lot of people don't understand is a lot of the people that had technically had a slave, but they really weren't a slave in the in the really horrible sense. Like the really bad ones that were chained and then they were whipped if they didn't work hard or tried to escape and this and that. That went on. But a lot of the people it was just a handful of servants, and they weren't in chains. There was nobody there with whips. There was nobody there with guns keeping them around. They weren't exactly treated like white people, but they weren't horribly treated. They weren't really mistreated, you know. They were more like indentured servants. Uh, Used to be treated in a lot of ways. So you are technically a slave, but you're not done in the real bad way. But they didn't want to talk about that. Which again, slavery was just, it was horrible, but there was different levels. Washington, George Washington, he had a slave with him the whole time during the war, but that was his assistant, basically, and he was well dressed. He treated fairly well. He wasn't in chains. He wasn't mistreated. You know, so you got to look at it. It's not just one thing. But anyway, I got sidetracked. But the point is that build up. You see that now, almost everybody that isn't white has vicious, horrific race hatred and anger and racism toward white people. That wasn't the case 30, 40 years ago. It wasn't. It has gotten so much worse. White people have gotten so much less racist, and everybody else, every single group, has gotten 1,000 times more racist toward white people. That's by design. That was the cultural war, and so many people didn't see it happening, and so nothing was done to slow it down. Virtually nothing, and anybody who saw it and spoke up was viciously assaulted and called racist, and you know what happened to them. So anyway, so now I saw this coming 30, 35 years ago. This type of thing. This is a lot more to it. And where were the psychologists, the psychiatrists, in mass trying to get together and put the word out, let them know let everyone in the country know what's happening, why it's happening, and ways to fix it. Give everyone ways to fix it, correct it. Nobody did that. They sure as hell wrote a book because they could make a lot of money. Well, 99% of the people that read those books don't really get much help. And they didn't care. They just wanted the money and the fame. So I'm very disappointed in psychology academia in the West, basically. They failed us for the most part. And they've enriched themselves and garnered fame and fortune, and then still don't really seem to care all that much. It's like, oh well, that's kind of the attitude, and it's sad to see. So back to the original, like I said, they weren't trained in the proper way to really go out and help people, especially not help people in mass. They were basically trained to keep people coming back like they're the crack dealer, So you need to just help yourself, everybody. Meditate, learn psychology yourself. Take some time every now and then and just look into yourself and see, what kind of person am I? How do I react to this situation and that situation? And figure out your own ways on how to deal properly with any negativity in your life. But never make any decisions when you're angry or anxious or depressed. Never make any decisions like that. No major decisions based when you're like that in any situation. I've made some mistakes like that. So I hope this helps everybody. So, thank you.